If you believe there is more in our world than we can see, things hidden and elusive, living beings as old as the hills, you're in the right place. I'm Kitty. Welcome to Fairy Encounters. You know, encounters with white fairy are a rare thing, which makes sense when we consider that dazzlingly bright white doesn't appear too often in nature either. Sure, there is white everywhere, but not bright white, stark white. But you know me, I have searched far and wide and discovered 6 encounters with fairies which were so blindingly white that people were not only stopped in their tracks, but probably forced to reassess their view of life after the encounter. This is a real mixed bag of bizarre sightings, so get yourself comfy, and I hope you enjoy this series of back-to-back true tales of white fairies. There was a fishing spot out off Galway where fish were known to be very plentiful, and many fishermen used to fish there after 12 o'clock at night. One night, an old man stood just looking out over the sea before he entered his boat, and he saw a white fairy boat coming in to the place where the fish were known to be plentiful. The man decided not to take his boat out that night, but returned home and told of what he had seen. This old man, this fisherman, knew 6 men who were determined to go out the following night, and he went to them and warned them that it wasn't safe on account of his having seen the white fairy boat, but they did not heed his advice. That night, the 6 men were watched as they sailed out to the fishing spot. Soon, the white fairy boat appeared, and it swept their boat away. They were never seen again. There was a man who lived in the village of Cavetown in County Roscommon who was known as a great hunter. There was a little wood near his home, and he went fowling in this wood almost every night. Well, one night, this man was walking down a little road through the wood, and on crossing a bridge, he saw a white fairy woman stood before him. He stopped at once and decided to try and walk past her on one side, but found he was unable to pass her. He couldn't move forward. So he did the only thing he could and turned and made his way back home. He returned to the wood later that night and again found the white fairy woman was still standing at the edge of the bridge. Once again he turned and went home, having decided that this time he would return with his gun. Well, thankfully, he was talked out of this by his friends, and soon after the events of that night, the man went to America and lived a long, prosperous life. Now, many who knew the man believed that this was because he spared the life of the fairy woman. I was once speaking with my friend Stephen of our personal experiences with fairies, and he pointed to a rocky knoll in a field not far from where we were sitting, just outside his home, and he said, "I saw a dog with a bright white ring around his neck just by that hill there. And the oldest men round Galway, well, they've seen him too, for he has been here 100 years or more. He is a dog of the good people, you see, and only appears at certain hours of the night." I was once at a wake. It was late at night and I'd stepped out of the house to get some fresh air. It must have been around midnight. Well, I saw, running up and down the neighbouring field, a woman with a strange white light in her hand. I called my daughter to come out of the house to witness the sight with me, but she could see nothing. But all the while, The woman dressed in white was in the field, shaking the white thing in her hands and running back and forth as fast as you or I could wink. One night, John Hennigan, who lives in Kilvolan, and his wife had come in from visiting neighbours and had gone straight to bed. Shortly afterwards, John heard a knock at the door. It was very late, so he took his gun with him and went out to see what was in it. And what did he see as he stood at the door? But 4 bright white dogs outside his house. As soon as he saw the dogs, he closed the front door and went back to his room. Looking out the window, he saw that the dogs were standing at his gate, and he told his wife to get up and take a look at them. The two of them stood at the window and saw that the dogs, instead of leaving, were standing up on their back legs, grinning broadly back at them. After that night, the dogs disappeared and were never seen. Some few weeks before Christmas of 1910, at midnight on a very dark night, my friend and I, who were both 23 years of age at the time, were on horseback on our way home from Limerick. When near Listowel, we noticed a light about half a mile ahead. At first, it seemed to be no more than a light in some house, but as we came nearer to it, and it was passing out of our direct line of vision, we saw that it was moving up and down, to and fro, diminishing to a spark, then expanding into a yellow, luminous flame. Before we came into Listowel, we noticed 2 lights about 100 yards to our right, which resembled the light seen first. Suddenly, each of these lights expanded into the same sort of yellow, luminous flame, about 6 feet high by 4 feet broad. In the midst of each flame, we saw a radiant being having human form. Presently, the lights moved toward one another and made contact, whereupon the 2 beings in them were seen to be walking side by side. The beings' bodies were formed of a pure, dazzling radiance, white like the radiance of the sun, and much brighter than the yellow light or aura surrounding them. So dazzling was the radiance, like a halo round their heads, that we could not distinguish the countenance of the beings. We could only distinguish the general shape of their bodies, though their heads were very clearly outlined, because this halo-like radiance, which was the brightest light about them, seemed to radiate from or rest upon the head of each being. As we travelled on, a house intervened between us and the lights, and we saw no more of them. It was the first time we had ever seen such phenomena, but in our hurry to get home, we were not wise enough to stop and make further examination. The sight of shining white fairies is one which is sure to catch our eye, and perhaps even leave us mesmerised. And I think that's their intention. We can't know if this is how they appear in their true form, but in these 6 incredible encounters, it is how they chose to appear before us. Well, if you enjoyed this video, do yourself a favour and check out the one on screen now. I think you'll love it. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!